Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we will be going over the Stamina Necromancer. Now, I have 64 points into Stamina. My max health is 20.4. My maximum Stamina is 30.7. My Stamina recovery is low, but that's due to the sets that we're wearing. Weapon damage is 3.4k. Weapon crit is 63.2. The boon I'm running is the Shadow, and then the food that I'm using is basic max health, max Stamina food. So, champion points. 24 into Warlord, 29 Sprinter, 14 Bashing Focus, 64 Tenacity, 64 Mooncalf, 35 Shadow Ward, 40 Tumbling. Not there. 19 Physical Weapon Expert, 48 Master at Arms, 52 Thermometer, 61 Precise Strike, 26 Piercing, and 64 Mighty. 34 Ironclad, 31 Medium Armor Focus, 34 Spell Shield, 64 Hardy, 64 Elemental Defender, and 43 Quick Recovery. So, sets. Well, let's see. Let's go ahead and show you what you look like with Dubious on. Dubious, your max health drops to 17.5, your max stamina drops to 28.2, but your stamina recovery goes up to 1.2. So this isn't necessarily a bad setup. You can make do with this as well, or if you prefer to have more max health and more max stamina over recovery, it's entirely up to you. With this set, you can actually use either one of them and be absolutely fine. For the most part, though, I tend to run around with Dubious. For the initial recovery and trials, for the long fights and things like that, because boss fights. But most 4-man content, most dungeons, I'm using basic braised rabbit with spring vegetables. Just for the max health, max down. Recovery isn't necessarily a big deal. So, monster set. Main one I'm running is Veldrath. I'm running a heavy helmet and medium shoulders. Divines, all with max stamina. What this set does, it gives us weapon damage, and when you deal damage, you have a 20% chance to spawn 3 disease spores in front of you after 1 second. That deals 13.8k disease damage to the first enemy they hit. This effect can occur once every 9 seconds. Now, monster sets, if you don't have Veldrath, because I understand sometimes, even though it's been out for a long time, sometimes Cradle of Shadows, which is where that comes from, can get really glitchy. And it becomes an extremely pain to get through. And if that's the case, you can always go with Storm Fist, which will give you stamina recovery. When you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to create a Thunder Fist to crush the enemy, dealing 1.9k shock damage every 1 second for 3 seconds to all enemies within 4 meters, and a final 10.7k physical damage when the fist closes. This effect can occur once every 8 seconds. Or Celine's adds 1k max stamina. When you deal direct melee damage, you have a 15% chance to call on a primal spirit that mauls the closest enemy in front of you after 1.3 seconds for 16k physical damage. This effect can occur once every 4 seconds. If you don't have Veldrath, Celine's would be the second choice. That comes from Celine's Web. Stormfist comes from Tempest Island. And then we have Crags, which is probably the easiest one to get. It comes from Fungal Grotto 1 on that. I understand that dungeon is very, very hard. It is just, the monster is complicated to get through, but Fungal 1, if you just grit your teeth and get through it, you can get Crags, which will give you physical penetration, and when you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to spawn Dreg Limbs that create shockwaves in front of you, dealing 1.7k physical damage over 0.4 seconds for 1.2 seconds. This effect can occur once every 3 seconds. Now, so those are pretty much the monster sets that I would run, that you have choice in running, that would be best. Celotrix is okay too, but the damage that it deals out isn't necessarily that great. But if you need a stun for the enemies, then you can go with Celotrix. But these would be the 4 that I would pick. Crags might be the hardest one to get from Fungal 1, followed by Celine's, Stormfist, and then Veldrath. Veldrath would be probably the hardest one to get. But Crags is right up there with it. This first 5-piece set we're running is Warbands. This comes from Depths of Maltar. It gives us weapon crit, physical penetration, and when you deal critical damage, you gain a stack of precision, increasing your weapon critical by 129 for 10 seconds, up to 10 stacks max. At max stacks, you also gain minor force, increasing your critical damage done by 10%. So with this set, we're just running a chest, bracers and legs, all divines, all with max stamina, and then we're running 2 daggers, 1 Nern, and 1 sharpened, glyphed with poison damage enchant and a physical damage absorb stamina enchant on the offhand. So if you, this is a basically a nice little set. It's a weaker version of AY, but due to this, we don't have to use Rearming Trap in our rotation, so we can mix and match with the set with that little free spot where Rearming Trap normally would be, allowing us to do, gives us a flex spot more or less. So now the second 5-piece set that we're rocking is Vicious Athenian. This is one of the reasons why we can get away with kind of low stam recovery and 4-man content. Is because this is weapon crit. It gives us weapon crit, gives us minor slayer at all times, increasing your damage done to dungeon, trial, and arena monsters by 5%. Weapon critical gives us weapon damage and reduce the cost of your stamina abilities by 8%. When an enemy you have recently damaged dies, you restore 2.1k stamina and gain major expedition for 8 seconds. Increase your movement speed by 30%. They in Elsweyr they released a Magicka. They released a Magicka set for this. False. Wow, I can't believe it's false eyes. Something. I can't believe it is eluding my mind right now. And I was just looking at it too, not too long ago. So, with Elsweyr drops, they finally released a set of that False Gods. There we go. False Gods Devotion. It's basically a Magicka version of Vicious Athenian, and that worked great on the Necromancer, so I decided to try out Vicious Athenian on the Stem Necromancer, and it was actually relatively fun. Originally, I was going with the old setup with Two-Fanged Snake over Warband. Basically, it gives us weapon damage, max stam, weapon crit. When you deal damage, your physical penetration is increased by 860 for 3 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. Of course, if you use this, I would take out some points in the penetration CP. But because I'm not using this, I'm using Warband. I've made some adjustments to that. But I like Warband, so I don't have to use Rearming Trap. Yeah. And then back bar, we're using a Maelstrom Bow infused with a weapon damage enchant on it. This basically increases the damage volley deals by 161 each tick. The bonus increases by 56 every time volley ticks. So, if you don't have a trial team, Warband comes from Death's Altar, which is a 4-man dungeon. On normal's relatively easy to get through, but if you don't have a trial team or you don't do trials, then another set that you can run, because Two-Fanged Snake comes from Sanctum Ophidian, so it might not be for you as it is. But if you don't do trials, Hunting's Rage is not a bad set to run. That is a craftable set. You also have Leviathan, which gives you max stam, weapon crit, and weapon crit. This comes from Crypt of Hearts. You can run that. But if you were to run Leviathan, I would get rid of Warband and start using Rearming Trap. There is also Viper Sting. Gives weapon crit, max stam, weapon critical. When you deal damage with a melee attack, you deal an additional 9.2k poison damage over 4 seconds. This effect can occur once every 4 seconds. It's not a bad set to have. Pillar of the Nern's a nice little set as well. It gives max stamina, weapon critical, weapon damage. When you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to create a fissure underneath the enemy after 1 second, dealing 2.6k physical damage to all enemies within 2.5 meters and causing them to bleed for an additional 11.6k physical damage over 10 seconds. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. Sure Venom isn't bad either if you don't have a Maelstrom Bow on their back bar. Because you can basically poison injection, works as an execute, so that will work there as well. But if you bar swap off of it and you don't have it on your front bar, then it will not trigger it. It's because if I know a lot of people that I play with, and myself included, when we hit poison injection, we tend to bar swap, so that way when it hits, it's getting the weapon damage from our front bar, from our dual wield instead of the bow bar. So if you do that and you don't have Sure Venom on both bars, then that it will not trigger it, because it's not hitting on your front on your back bar, it's hitting on your front bar. So let's see, scavenging demise might be something you want to look into, because we have quite a few poison abilities, or poison and disease. Okay, so with the medium armors there. Overland sets. Let's see, where are the overland sets? There we are. Let me go ahead and pull this out and go over a few overland sets that you might want to look at running if you're just getting started out. Spring of Thorns isn't bad for the physical penetration as well. Then there's Defiler, weapon damage, weapon crit, weapon critical. When you deal critical damage, you have an 8% chance to summon Hunger. This spews poison to all enemies in front of it, dealing 8k poison damage and stunning enemy hit for 5 seconds. Viper is definitely better than this, but if you just want to stick with the poison theme, Defiler isn't necessarily a bad set. That comes from Vardenfell. Let's see. You have Swamp Raider here. Swamp Raider is a set I definitely recommend to you if you are starting out. It's a weapon critical, weapon damage, max damage, and it's 400 weapon damage to your poison and disease damage abilities. Just about every ability that we have is poison and disease damage. So, and then you have Red Mountain. Weapon damage, max damage, weapon critical. When you deal damage with a weapon ability, you have a 10% chance to spawn a volcano that erupts after 1 second. Launching liquid hot magma at the closest enemy, dealing 10k flame damage. This effect can occur once every 2 seconds. So we use Rending Slash, and we have Poison Injection, and we have Volley. All that will trigger Red Mountain. So Briarheart isn't a bad set to have either. It's going to give, when you deal critical damage, you have a 10% chance to increase your weapon damage by 449 for 10 seconds while this effect is active. Your critical strike heals you for 609 health. Effect can occur once every 15 seconds. Unfathomable Darkness, weapon critical, physical penetration, weapon damage. When you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to call a murder of crows around you for 12 seconds. Every 3 seconds, a crow will be sent to peck the closest enemy within 12 meters of you, dealing 5.3k physical damage. This effect can occur once every 15 seconds. So, outside of that, that would be about it. If you don't have Warband, but you don't want to use, or you're just having trouble using Rearming Trap, or putting that on your bar, or for whatever reason, Griffin's Ferocity wouldn't be a bad set to have until you farm up Warband, because it gives you Minor Force and Minor Expedition for 3 seconds. After dealing direct damage, you gain Minor Force and Minor Expedition for 3 seconds, increasing your critical damage done by 10%, increasing your movement speed by 10%. So, you can also go with that until you get Dead Water, until you get Warband, or until you work your rotation out a little more to where Rearming Trap isn't a problem. But outside of that, I think it was like 10 sets or so. Those would be those are some really nice ones to run on a DPS that are not trials. So, skills. We have Venom Skull here. Lob an explosive skull at an enemy, dealing 8.2k poison damage. Every third cast of this ability deals 20% increased damage. While slotted, casting any Necromancer ability while you are in combat will count towards the third cast. Blighted Blast Bones. Summon a decaying skeleton from the ground after 2.5 seconds. The skeleton runs after the target and explodes when it gets close to them, dealing 13.8k disease damage to all enemies nearby and applying major defile to them for 4 seconds, reducing healing received and health recovery by 30%. Create corpse on death. So, Rending Slashes. Slash an enemy with both weapons to cause deep lacerations, dealing 2.6k physical damage with each weapon and cause them to bleed for an additional 13.4k physical damage over 10 seconds. You also reduce their movement speed by 40% for 4 seconds. Detonating Siphon. Violently drain the last spark of life. Violently drain the last spark of life from a corpse, dealing 25.9k disease damage over 12 seconds to all enemies around the corpse and between you and the corpse. If the siphons last its full duration, it causes the corpse to explode, dealing an additional 6.9k disease damage to all enemies around the corpse. While slotted, your damage done is increased by 3%. And then this is where we can flex. This would normally be Rearming Trap, but because we're running Warband, we're using Expert Hunter here. While slotted, you gain Major Savagery, increasing your weapon critical rating by 2.1. Of course, you get that from your Essence of Weapon Power pods. So, you can, if you're needing for whatever reason to pull enemies, like in Veteran Maul of Cars, to pull the little ads that spawn up on the twins over to you, you can put Silver Leash there. Or if you're in AA, or if you're in just somewhere where you need more defense, you can throw this down. This will increase your stam recovery by 10%, and it will reduce the damage you take by 8% while you're standing in it. So, and you'll still keep the extra 3% for having a fire skilled ability slotted. Or if you just want to put Vigor there, you can put Vigor there as well, and it won't hurt nothing. but I like having that little extra damage. So we have Flawless Dawnbreaker as our ultimate. Arm yourself with Meridia's Sacred Sword and dispense her Retribution, dealing 11.5k physical damage to enemies in front of you and an additional 14k physical damage over 6 seconds. While slotted, your weapon damage is increased by 5%. So, of course, with Slayer here, it's an extra 3% as well, so it's an extra 8% for having that slotted on our front bar, plus this. So, but like I said, if you don't want to have that there, then you can always go with Vigor, and you can just put Vigor here to have a heal on your bar. So it's not going to hurt nothing, but it's up to you. Then we have Poison Injection. Shoot an arrow coated in Bandera poison at an enemy, dealing 4.4k poison damage, an additional 9k poison damage over 10 seconds. The damage over time deals up to 260% more damage to enemies under 50% health. Endless Hell. Launches a multitude of arrows in the sky to rain down, dealing 1.1k physical damage to enemies in the target area every 0.5 seconds for 10 seconds. Razor Caltrops. Hurl an exploding ball of Caltrops that scatter over the target area, dealing 1.7k physical damage every 1 second, and reducing movement speed by 30%. When the ball of Caltrops initially explodes, it deals an immediate 5.4k physical damage. Then we have Skeletal Archer. Unearth a Skeletal Archer from the dirt to fight by your side for 16 seconds. The Archer attacks the closest enemy every 2 seconds, dealing 2.3k physical damage. Each time the Archer deals damage, his next attack will do 10% more damage than the previous attack. Create a corpse on death. And then we have Mortal Coil. Siphon the last remnants of life from a corpse, healing for 7.3k health over 12 seconds, and yourself and all allies between you and the corpse. You also restore 2.8k stamina over 12 seconds while siphoning the corpse. Also, your healing done is increased by 3%. So, this is why we can, with Vicious Opinion and with this, we can kind of get away with low stam recovery in most 4-man content. But in a long drawn out fight, we have corpse here. We have, this creates a corpse that we can still siphon off of. This creates a corpse. Of course, we'll be using one of these corpses on this right here. So, there's ways. And then Pestilent Colossus. Unleashes Pestilent Flesh Colossus to pulverize enemies in the area. The Colossus smashes the ground 3 times over 3 seconds, dealing 9.2k, 10.1k, and 11k disease damage with the first, second, and third smash. Each smash applies major vulnerability to any enemies hit for 3 seconds, increasing their damage taken by 30%. So yeah, that is the skills. So to recap, if you don't have Warband, this comes from Depths of Maltar. This comes from any Crag. Vicious Affinity comes from any Cragmore trial, and then of course this comes from Cradle of Shadows. If you don't do trials, Swamp Raider would be a really good set to run. Briarheart would be just as good too if you're just getting started out. You can buy all of that off of the trader, and you can even get some from quests. You can get a Swamp Raider dagger sharpened called Cell Cutter dagger from a quest in Shadowfen. So if you have 2 level 160 characters, or you can find it on the Guild Trader probably for 4, I've seen it as low as 2k, as high as 10k. And then there's also Briarheart daggers that you can get a quest from. They're powered. You'd have to transmute those. But all that you can get from a stand, or you can farm Viper and stuff like that. There's tons of options for stamina characters to have fun with. But yeah, I hope y'all enjoy. Until next time, take care.